Dear 8-pound, 11-ounce baby Jesus, just swinging away in your manger. Please help guide 6'7", 305-pound offensive tackle George Silva away from the mighty Ducks of the O and the U variety to throw an S in the middle and make your way on down to Stillwater, America.
You are Locked On Oklahoma State, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma State Cowboys, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Howdy, y'all, and hello, all. Welcome back to Locked On Oklahoma State, your daily stop for all things cowboy and cowgirl related. My name is Cody Stovall. I want to thank you kindly for stopping by to make this your first listen. We're available on all of your podcasting platforms, visually as well on YouTube. Find me personally on X at AllDayo State. Today, we get to roll right into this equation and conversation in regards to potentially landing 6'7", 307-pound offensive tackle by way of Oregon, George Silva. This has been put out by On3 Sports, Pete Nakos, that within 47 seconds of Mr. Silva entering the transfer portal, he might be landing in Stillwater, Oklahoma, to be part of this Oklahoma State transfer portal class that has to get everybody pretty excited, especially after a catastrophic season that took place this previous year. The Restore Order crew has brought in a lot of guys to help get Oklahoma State where it's supposed to be. Where it's supposed to be is in Arlington. Part of this is the fact that Oklahoma State did lose 7 experienced offensive linemen. Well, technically 8 if you want to throw in the transfer Jason Queso Brooks over to Houston. So we definitely needed some more pieces. We do have some young guys that I think we are pretty excited about, but we also need to kind of mix in a decent amount of this transfer portal class to help guide this offensive line back to where it looked like under Ollie Gordon's Doak Walker award-winning 1,700-plus yard season. We need to be able to rely on the run game, and thankfully, since we have 4 mobile quarterbacks, it's going to be a little bit more pronounced that sometimes we're going to need to get outside the pocket, and that is typically when younger linemen trip up because they get into, the grabbing of the jerseys and holding and tugging, and there's a decent amount of it down low. But the difference is when you have somebody with a significant amount of experience, they typically know how to kind of shield it from the referees, which can help your run game. This individual would be a very big get. Oklahoma State has been able to receive commitments from guys like J.K. Johnson coming over from LSU, obviously Jalen Davies from UCLA, Kalani Sitafi, Havili Kafusi, thank you, sorry. He's coming over from UCLA as well. There's a large number of individuals coming to Oklahoma State that have come from a very historically big-time background, including Shandavian Bradley, the former 5-star, coming over from Tennessee. This could be another addition that is huge, and it catapults Oklahoma State into a restoring order type of season. Now, of course, 6'7", 307 pounds is very difficult to replicate, and this dude comes by way of a junior college, Fullerton College, actually. He was a 4-star JUCO prospect by 247. He came out as a top 10 junior college player in the United States, ranked number 3 with the number 5 overall composite. He was also being a top 50 junior college player in America by ESPN as well. Number 1 offensive tackle in the country in the JUCO ranks by 247. The top junior college player in all of California. He was a prep star all-Western region pick in JUCO. He helped lead Fullerton College to a 10-2 record and undefeated conference season and the championship game appearance. That offense averaged over 387 yards a game, including 202 yards per game just on the ground. This dude also paved the way in the very beginning at Oregon. He appeared in 7 games his previous season as a Duck. He saw over 51 snaps as an offensive tackle. He also saw a considerable number of snaps on the special team as well. He earned an 86.2 pass blocking grade from PFF. That is going to allow him to seamlessly slide into Stillwater, Oklahoma, if this is in fact actual and factual, that he's possibly coming to Stillwater, Oklahoma. Of course, just from the notoriety and the name alone, this is obviously big time. But I also think it does accentuate the fact that we have had a little bit of a shift in recruiting. Now, we are going to talk about Jalen Stewart, the first 2026 high school commit thus far. But I feel like there's going to be a lot more coming down the pipeline because we've gotten in on some guys like Caden Batman Jones. which the previous staff, for whatever reason, wasn't really dialed in on. So guys like that are obviously paying attention to the staff shakeup that happened in Stillwater. The fact that we've got a considerable number of SEC and NFL coaches that all have ties for the most part of playing together or coaching together. And then offensively, of course, when you have the returning quarterbacks that we have to create a dynamic quarterback battle, plus you bring in Haas Haney, this idea of two offensive line coaches, both being former Cowboys, should be able to help invigorate the passion of playing for the logo on the chest. Now, I think you're seeing in some degree that basketball is lacking a little bit of that tenacity, that hustle, that effort. I don't want to necessarily say give a hoot, but it's not the same as it was earlier in the season, and it's also not the same as it has been in the past. You got to have a decent mixture of guys that can catapult these dudes to the NFL, but also a decent number mixed in there that bleed orange. And I think Doug Meacham is also an individual that bleeds orange, going back to his days of blocking for Barry Sanders and Thurman Thomas and Mike Gundy, of course. This is a very good sign for Oklahoma State, regardless of what the numerical evaluation is of the recruiting class or the transfer class. It's all going to be more determined on the field. And we do know that there's some loosey-goosey numbers being played when it comes to the scouting, recruiting, evaluation, as it pertains to what conference you end up at. It is what it is. There's proof in the pudding for years now that if you go from the SEC to a different conference or the Big Ten to a different conference, you inherently are going to get downgraded. But if you go from the Big 12 to the SEC, yada, 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 then you're going to get an extra star. So you can take some of that with a grain of salt, and it's all going to be produced by what happens on the field. This is a phenomenal ordeal for Oklahoma State to be a part of. And again, you also got Trip White coming over from Ole Miss. Mordecai McDaniel spent years at Florida before one season at Charlotte. This is a really good sign for Oklahoma State moving forward. You also have Shamar Rigby coming over from Purdue. You have Jalen Lloyd coming over from Nebraska. It's not just your run-of-the-mill Division II guys that Oklahoma State has been somewhat famous for, not only in players but also in coordinators. This is a little bit of a different feel. And I have to thank Mike Gundy to some degree because he did allow the shakeup to happen, regardless of what the reasoning may or may not have been. I think he does see there has to be a little bit of a shift in mentality. We have to get a little bit more aggressive in recruiting. We have to be able to get in on more guys than we've been able to get in on previously. We have to add layers to the checks and balances system of what are you looking for? What boxes does this individual check? And at the end of the day, you have to add the box of, is this player a dog? Point blank, period. Outside of just the X's and O's, outside of the scholastics, outside of taking care of responsibilities, which you absolutely need, outside of being part of the Cowboy culture to grow into a better young man, you also have to have the right mentality. And I think this is yet another indication that the coaching staff not only has the right mentality, but we're getting in on guys that appreciate that. And it feels like this transfer class is going to be able to reciprocate the feelings that we're all getting in as a fan base. After the debacle of last year, it is hard to get overly excited. But at the same time, if you have a pulse and you bleed orange, or you like to sip on a significant amount of orange Kool-Aid like I do myself, these are good things. This is a good sign for Oklahoma State. Even if, for whatever reason, Mr. Silva decides to go elsewhere, I do think that this accentuates the abilities that this staff has as opposed to some of the previous ones. And you don't want to have to worry about the number side if you can get production out of the deal. Speaking of production and numbers, it is tax season, and today you need to be focused on what is best for you and your family when it comes to getting taxes done. This message is from our sponsor today, Intuit TurboTax. Dealing with taxes is dealing with piles of paperwork and endless amounts of frustration. There's not really a need anymore for the waiting, the wondering, the worrying that goes with whether you're going to get money back or whether you're going to owe or what you can file to make it make the most amount of sense. Well, now you can have your taxes done easily by uploading your forms to a TurboTax expert who's matched to your unique tax situation. An expert who's backed by the latest technology with cross-checks, millions of data points for 100% accuracy. While they work on your taxes, you get real-time updates on their progress, and you get the most money back guaranteed. All while you just simply go about your day without all of the stressing, the worrying, the waiting, the wondering. This is tax season, and you need to make sure it's done right with Intuit TurboTax. Get an expert today by going to TurboTax.com. This is only available with TurboTax Live Full Service. Real-time updates are only in the iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. Get the experts that you deserve for you and your family by going to TurboTax.com. Get the experts today. So now we get to shift a little bit. We're just talking about experts, and we have one of those in the conference in Brett Yormark. And with all of the shakeups that are currently happening with the SEC and the Big Ten, and even though there is some public outcry about it, some of it not really being great for college football, you're having some of the backing from even some of the media conglomerates like ESPN that this is not good for football if this continues down this pathway. Now, as it pertains to outside of the Big Ten and the SEC, it does feel like the super conference thing is coming. And then you have to kind of set yourself up for what teams in the Big 12 are applicable to join, what teams in the ACC are applicable to join. I don't even necessarily know if it's going to be a Big Ten SEC style of equation or more of like, this division, that division. But nonetheless, we need to be involved in this whole shakeup. And we tend to forget that Brett Yormark is a visionary. He is the one that was doing stuff in Dallas that forced the SEC to try to do some of their media stuff in Dallas. And then he also was a step ahead, went to Vegas, had fun with that. Now we return to Texas to kind of re-grab that throne. But he was the guy who put on the halftime shows, the first ones to happen in college bowl games. He's the guy that found a way to not only incorporate the WWE, but have it part of the sponsorship and have some of the WWE legends be down there on the field and be mixing it up with the players and having fun and the gifts and things that happens as the bowl games kind of get led up to. This is all what Brett Yormark has done. And even if you go outside of that, this might be a time that we dig back to, are we going to be a naming rights conference? Are we going to be the all-state Big 12? Do I love the idea? Absolutely not. I don't like the idea of the Loves logo on the Thunder jerseys either, but this is a money situation. The Big Ten and the SEC control most of college football due to money. This is an opportunity for Brett Yormark to once again prove why he is the visionary that we can rely upon, whether it be the WWF stuff. Are we going to be the All-State 12? Well, if it means more financial compensation for every university, good for the conference, good for recruiting, good for NIL, bring it on. Are we going to end up with that third-party partnership where we get $1 billion, but we're owed 20% stake, or we owe somebody 20% stake in the conference? At the end of the day, if more people get more money and we get more exposure and we get more access to the top-notch, not only facilities, but players in the country, then you can use that as future investments and future profits if you grow the Big 12. We're now in a position where we actually have to kind of get along with the ACC, which is kind of ironic because we spent the majority of the year talking about how the ACC and the Big 12 are not quite the same. The Big 12's considerably more deep, right, from top to bottom, but also I feel like the top-tier teams in the Big 12 are better than the top-tier teams in the ACC, yet with the shakeups happening with the SEC and the Big 10, we all kind of got to be in this thing together, just like we got to be in this with the G5 schools. We got to help Boise State represent. Now, most of this is going to get sorted out on the field, as we've had several conversations about. The Big 12 needs to grab the bull by the horns and show everybody why we're a conference that needs to be reckoned with. But the idea that the Big 12 is going to slide further backwards, whether they get more buys in the SEC or they kind of add a little bit of a new layer to their conference championship slate, regardless of what happens, I feel like we should all sit back and relax a little bit because Brett Yormark is at the helm. And you can go back a long ways, including 1978. Thank you, John Kurtz, for giving us that little historical lesson there. But 1978, we had the opportunity to get Arkansas in the Big 12 and potentially remove Kansas State. Do I want Kansas State out? No. Am I glad that we were able to keep Kansas State in? Absolutely. But that was due to the conference commissioner back then not allowing North Texas and Northern Illinois or something to that effect, not in the conference, and then threw a blanket statement that actually we're just not going to let anybody in, including Arkansas. And this is back when they were having 9-10 win seasons repeatedly in football. They were going to Final Fours with Eddie Sutton as the coach. Eddie Sutton even did an interview talking about getting into the Big Eight and from the Southwest Conference, how that was going to be beneficial to Arkansas and anybody else. And then a little bit later on, right, they didn't get an SEC invite before the SEC is what it is today. And that is primarily due to marketing, right? The SEC from the get-go, 2007, 6, 5-ish, what around that range, they were pumping the SEC chants. Every time they'd win any semblance of a big game or a bowl game, they would all have the SEC signs running around. They would take pictures with it, videos with it. Next to whatever the trophy was would be a bunch of SEC logos. So even before they were earning their rightful place as the top dog, they were pushing the conference in everybody's eyeballs. We did not do that. We had lack of leadership at times. I think Bob Bowlesby was okay, but he wasn't a visionary. He obviously allowed Texas and OU to continue to get away with a little bit too much and feel like they were a little bit bigger than their britches, even when Texas was going through their disastrous years where they were getting beat by the likes of Oklahoma State repeatedly. I think we'd beaten Texas up until this previous Big 12 championship game before they left, like 12 of 15 seasons or something to that effect. They were not an issue for us. Brett Yormark is doing a lot. And some of it, he might just be, gauging public perception of it. But as this whole SEC, Big Ten putting a monopoly on college football gets presented, you're going to have to see the Brett Yormarks of the world make some moves to not only add relevance to the conference, keep us in the forefront of people's eyeballs, and it not be gimmicky. So far, none of it has been, even though some of it was viewed as gimmicky in the beginning. Ironically enough, again, the SEC took their media days to a different spot to kind of compete with the Big 12. Now everybody's either doing or having the consideration of halftime shows. And that was, again, all beginning of Brett Yormark. So I have faith that Brett Yormark is exactly what this conference needs to not only kind of keep the footing with where we are, but get ourselves more marketability and more possibilities moving forward. We have to keep upticking, but we need wins too. I mean, we are going to need the Big 12 to have a good March Madness run here. Because unfortunately, this is like the first year in a long time that the Big 12 has not been the king of college basketball. The SEC has kind of been guiding the light this year. The Big 12 is not far behind, but we're going to need March Madness to take shape. And we all know Brett Yormark is a basketball guy. So if we're able to do that, he's going to use that marketing to help shift the perception nationally of the Big 12. Just like we, as Oklahoma State, need to be the flag bearers of the conference. With OU and Texas gone, the most wins is us. It should be us. We had our worst conference year since 1994. With some of the big names that we've been able to bring in the transfer portal, on top of the big-time coaches, both from the SEC and the NFL, this cachet is starting to kind of get deposits made. Now we need to transfer it on the field, and now we need to see Brett Yormark utilize something, whether it's baseball, basketball, football, to catapult this conference even more. If it's $1 billion that we're getting from a corporation with 20% stake, if we have 2 or 3 teams in the Final Four, and maybe a Big 12 team wins the whole daggone thing, that is something he can help utilize to get more money from that same corporation. If we have 3 teams make it to Omaha in baseball, if we have a team win the World Series, play for a World Series, that is more cachet that Brett Yormark can continue to utilize. I know I can't speak English half the time. Words are hard for me. But the utilization currently being put forth by Brett Yormark is great. It's what the conference needs. And I think there's more. We just have to do our parts now of giving him trophies, giving him bowl games, giving him massive wins and massive situations against the bigger conferences to utilize for us on our behalf. But I feel pretty good about where we are because of Brett Yormark. The Big 12 has been led previously by some I don't know, not always great commissioners, not bad, but not great, not visionaries. Brett Yormark is that guy. And this is the time for Oklahoma State to kind of take shape. And realistically, we need Utah and Arizona State to do the same alongside the Kansas States and Iowa States and TCUs and Baylors of the world. A little quick to the trigger there. What could be next? I'm pulling the trigger for national title number 54 at Oklahoma State. I bring this up primarily because track and field is doing some things right now, and they just recently flew from unranked to number 17 in the country, number 14 in the country. And this is after primarily the distance guys continue to kind of carry the torch. We missed out on the national title this season after winning the Natty the year before in cross country. Track and field might have a little ways to go still yet, but this is not a sport that we're historically big on. Cross country, yes. Winning national titles every few years in cross country is definitely worthy of an expectation. Track and field hasn't really gotten very close, but we're getting closer. And yes, we are using the distance medley relay crew to kind of help jumpstart this thing. But the squad of Brian Massow, Jordan Smith, Mehdi Yanori, and Brian Shoup just put forth the second best mark in history on legal size tracks. They also were able to kind of put forth some massive points in the mile with the 500 meters. We've got a lot of dudes that are getting faster and setting records as we prepare for the Big 12 Indoor Championships. Either that's the words coming back up on me in Lubbock, Texas. And they'll be joined by others ranked nationally. Texas Tech, number 5 in the country. Oklahoma State, number 14. Number 21 in America is Cincinnati. Number 25 is Baylor. You expect Baylor up there, but Oklahoma State being up there is kind of new for track and field. Since getting Tyreek Hill in 2014, I do feel like we've had a shift in focusing more on track and giving the legend in cross country, Dave Smith, more things to work with, whether it be more facility stuff, more training stuff, more NIL. We're hitting the road doing stuff in recruiting that I've never really seen us do before, and you are seeing it out on the track. So it is nice to see that there's fruits to our labor. So is track and field going to be the next sport to win a Natty? This is where I need you to fire away down in the comment section. Tell me what sport you think we win the next national title in. Softball, it's a possibility. We've got some things to iron out before it becomes more realistic, but we've got the talent to do it. We have Coach Kenny Gajewski. We are not afraid of massive competition because we've been to the World Series now so many times that it's the expectation. We are used to performing at that level, so it's only going to take some time. So let me know down in the comment section, is track and field going to shock the world? Is softball going to be the next national title recipient? In tennis, last year we won the ITA national title, but not the NCAA national championship. We've slid back a little bit in tennis, but we're still a top 5, top 10 style program, so it is a possibility. Wrestling, Penn State likely because of the points records that they've put up 2 years in a row now, essentially. They're going to be hard to catch. But could the Cowboys shock the world, especially after the wake-up call we just received from Iowa? Let me know down in the comment section. Golf. Alan Bratton seems to have the Cowboys back in contention after the first year in a long time that we slid outside the top 25s in nationals. The redemption story could be great for Alan Bratton. Is golf that sport? Baseball. We've got major leaguers up and down this roster out the wazoo. If it comes together, if the mound management's good, if the consistency is good, if scoring with runners in scoring position continues to matriculate upwards, baseball could make an Omaha run, finally put us where we belong in supers. Is a Natty a possibility in Stillwater, America this season? Let me know down below for all of you out in YouTube country. My podcasting folks, you know what to do. Leave the stars, hit the reviews, do your thing, because you're the lifeblood of this operation. You let me know what sport next Do you expect to see a national championship in Stillwater, Oklahoma? The Cowgirl basketball team, they're good enough to make a massive run. If they can string together consecutive big-time games, this could be a magical run for JC Hoyt and the Cowgirls. Is it a national championship run? Not likely, but crazier things have happened. So what do you think is the next viable opportunity in 2025 for the Cowboys or the Cowgirls to add national championship number 54? And of course, we're chasing Stanford and I think UCLA, which they have the swimming and diving and skiing and things of that nature, which add to their national championship numbers because they're so phenomenal at those sports. We don't really have the swimming and volleyball and things of that nature. So we're going to have to make up for it in other areas. But again, we have capabilities in a multitude of sports right now to make massive things happen. Is this the year that we add the next national championship? And what sport do you think that is in? My money, if I were to just to kind of, throw darts at a wall here, would probably have to be softball. Now, again, we don't look quite as complete as we did last season, where we beat OU in the Bedlam series in the Big 12s for the first time in like 15 seasons, something to that effect. But we have a deeper rotation if we can get Kyra Aycock dialed in. If Riley Crandall can get back to her Baylor days, I mean, they may have overutilized her a little bit, so we may need to bring her on a little more slowly. Baseball, I mean, there's not going to be very many teams in the country, in even the top 5, that have the hitting capabilities we have 1 through 9 with multiple DHs. We just have an embarrassment of riches. We just have to manage it and get it figured out. So baseball could be a legitimate possibility. Cowgirls could make a big-time run because we've got all of the pieces and the depth on the bench to make that happen. All righty, y'all. I reckon that's all we're going to have for this one right here. As always, I love you. God bless. Go Pokes. Thank you for tuning in to make this your first listen here in Locked On Oklahoma State. You could be anywhere. So happy you choose to be here. Go ahead and do me a favor. Hit the like button if you liked it. Hit the dislike button if you didn't, because that's okay too. More importantly, all my podcast people out there, you know what you are. You are what makes this thing click, run, drive, go. I appreciate you. Go hit the stars. Go leave the reviews. Appreciate you. Do what you do. All righty, y'all. Later, taters.